We've got another part 2 of our tournament masterclass series, getting you guys all ready for our tournament series that's starting this Saturday. Love seeing some old faces and some new faces as well. How many of you guys, have any of you guys seen the flop session I did like several months ago? Anyone? Okay. Oh, you watched it on YouTube. Okay. So just one. Then that's okay, because I'm definitely borrowing a few concepts. We'll talk about a few. Actually, I borrowed a lot of concepts, but we're going to talk about a few kind of like population weaknesses I'm noticing as well. So we'll get into that, which will be kind of an add-on from the last time. And then, how many people are kind of new to tournaments in general? I think I was hearing that you have not really played tournaments at all. Okay, so half of folks are like pretty new to tournaments. So this will be, I think this will be pretty good then. So really we're going over 3 things, which is just what are kind of like the general flop types or the different kinds of flops that you'll see. And this will be both, I mean, obviously you'll see this in both cash games and tournaments. What are the heuristics that are driving how often you want to bet on certain flops and how what sizing you want to use. And these things are very carefully linked. So what I want to teach you guys today is not really about trying to memorize like, okay, this exact flop, like king, queen, 3, rainbow, I know I'm supposed to bet 62% of the time and I'm supposed to use this exact sizing. Instead, I want you guys to think about like what are the general heuristics. Like you can look at any flop and then you can be like, okay, I think my range is favored here, so I want to be betting more. I don't know if more 62% or 72% or 80%, and frankly it doesn't matter. Just know that generally you're going to be betting more often than you're checking. And what is that? How does that then influence what sizing I want to use? And those are going to be really important. You can apply, and then you can look at most flops, at least and have a general idea. Okay, so just like a couple definitions first in terms of when we start to describe flop types, we have a few ways to define them. So first is describing flops as either dry or static, and then the converse of that is wet or dynamic. So dry/static basically just means these are disconnected boards, not really many draws, no like flush draws, not a ton of straight draws. And the main thing is that like on dry boards, usually whoever has the best hand, let's say on the flop, that doesn't change too often by the time you get to the turn and then also by the time you get to the river. On wet/dynamic boards, where there's a lot of flush draws, straight draws, it's quite connected, whoever has the best hand might change every single street depending on what cards come, and it happens a lot more often. So these are just ways of how you will describe flops. Another definition is range advantage. So range advantage is going to be a huge concept that's going to drive how often you want to bet, because it's going to come down to which player has the range advantage depending on which board. So will we have the range advantage if we're the in-position pre-flop aggressor, or does the opponent have the range advantage? And last week we talked all about flop fundamentals, so we kind of went over what our flop ranges should be, and so you can use that to kind of intuit kind of who will have an advantage depending on what kind of boards come out. So why it matters ultimately is whoever has the range advantage can apply a lot more pressure. So the best players are just going to know which boards that they should have the range advantage on and where their range is uncapped, as we call it, so they can have all the best hands and they know when their opponents are going to be relatively capped. And so they'll just kind of apply a ton of pressure, be super aggressive on those boards. And almost sometimes, regardless of what they have, it really will depend on what kind of player they're playing against. And then your opponents will generally be playing more defensively, more reactively. A similar but slightly different concept is nut advantage. So while our range as a whole can have a range advantage, which largely is driven by like all the hands in our range, we have a higher equity than our opponent. Nut advantage specifically means we have more of the best possible hands. So your range as a whole can have lower equity compared to your opponent, but you can have a lot more nutted hands like full houses, flushes, straights. So this is important as well, and this will also make implications on how often we can bet, because even if we have the range advantage, if our opponent has the nut advantage, we still have to be quite careful. But similarly, And very often, the person who has the range advantage will also have the nut advantage. It's less often where you'll find boards where these things will not fall on the same player. But similarly, when someone has the nut advantage, they get to be more aggressive, they get to put more pressure on their opponent, and then the players without the nuts have to play more defensively. Okay, so a couple questions for you guys now. Well, actually, before I move on to the next thing, does that do all the definitions generally make sense? Any questions about any of these concepts? Okay, yes.
Could you explain pot control? Is that like over there?
Yeah. So pot control is when you kind of want to control the size of the pot. So meaning you're not going to be taking a lot of aggressive action yourself. You're going to be kind of playing passively, checking and check calling, because you don't want to inflate the pot. You don't want to start putting a ton of money in, risking a lot of big blinds. And this is usually because you generally don't want to be putting a lot of money in when you don't have all the possible like best hands in your range.
Yeah.
Otherwise, you're just going to be probably punting way too much money for the strength of your hand. Yeah, so that's what we mean by pot control.
Yeah.
Good question. Okay. So now we're getting into the actual flop bet sizing heuristics. So let's assume the strategy on a certain board where our strategy is actually going to be mostly checking. So for whatever reason, our opponent has the range advantage and the nut advantage, and so we want to be checking a lot on this board. On those boards, how do you think that then influences our bet sizing when we're going to be checking a lot? When we choose to bet, how big should we be betting?
Small.
Small?
Small.
Who said small?
I said small.
Or no, sorry, oh, in the back. Okay, why do you think we bet small when we're supposed to be checking a lot?
Oh wait, you're supposed to be checking a lot.
Yeah, so this is when we're supposed to be checking. Let's say we're supposed to check 80% of the time and bet 20% of the time. So when we do bet, what sizing do you think we should be bet small at 20% of the time? How come?
Sometimes if you smash the board, even if the range advantage is sort of like with the opponent, I mean, sometimes you just got potted on the flop just to tell them that you're trying to steal it, and then even if they have the range advantage, they're gonna think that, you know, you should be checking why you betting, I'm in position, this pot hits me, like this board hits me way more than you. So on the odd time when it hits you or you just, the deck just hits on your face, you should just confuse them. You gotta mix it up, but generally if you're supposed to check, you should either check, and maybe it's difficult to pot control out of position, but you can do it. I mean, if you know what you're targeting and what you're up against and what the specific range of that player is, we have info on them. So playing for the first time with them, just play straight up with it.
Got it. So when, sorry, I didn't, what size?
You gotta like confuse them if you have info on the player and
Okay.
the board really does smash your cards, or if you really do connect,
Right.
but they have the range advantage, you can even pot it.
Okay, so you think we should go for pot
You
when we
can
don't?
even pot it, I mean, just
Okay.
to confuse them, and then so that they at least will either call, or like, they're never probably raising if you pot it out of position, and
Yeah.
they have the range advantage too. But I mean, that way you're keeping them in, and you're also confusing them, so they're guessing going to the turn where you have smashed the board, and they're probably drawing super pins.
Sure. Okay.
Yeah.
And the reason why I wanted to get to like a very specific answer is because the way the solver will drive us is generally going to be choosing, like, it'll be choosing either a large size or a small size.
It'll be a
Sometimes
polarized
it'll
card.
mix.
Yeah.
So I'm actually not paying into that. I feel like it's easier not to. But like, so if I had to distill your answer down, basically you think we should use a big size. If you're going to choose any size, you would prefer to use a big size.
If I really smash the board, I'm not gonna like play you.
Don't think
I'm
about
not
your
gonna-
hand. Think about what your range. Like just think about your range.
Yeah,
like-
I either pot it or like super small, like 10% pot, or maybe even check. Like
Okay,
10%
so you
pot
would-
is actually treated as a check. So I mean, either check or just pot it. There's no midway betting.
Okay, so you either go small or big,
Yeah.
and then
Both ways.
we had. Sorry, I can't really see your face with the light, but you said small.
Yeah.
Why do you think we should go small when we're checking a lot?
Your range is weaker, and so if you're betting small, you can bet fold with a weak range.
Hmm.
If they raise, I mean, well, your range is already expected to be weak, so you're able to bet more often with a smaller size, and when you do get raised, I would think.
We could just fold more.
Yeah, with your
Yeah.
strong hands.
Yes. You have an answer.
I think the answer is big, but I don't know why.
Okay, cool. So we got a mix. We got a mix, which is good. Which is good. So the answer here is big. You should be betting large. So and basically the thing that you guys should be thinking about here is the less often we want to bet, when we choose to bet, we should be going for a large size. And the converse happens when we're betting very often. Because I think you kind of said it in the back. Sorry, what's your name?
Key.
Keith? Key.
Yeah.
Awesome. So Key was saying, you kind of got to this, which is like, when you're betting very often, you kind of want to go for a small size. Whereas in this case, we're setting up a scenario where we're not betting very often. So we kind of want to take a lot of those hands that are just kind of like junk, that don't have a lot of equity, and just put them into kind of like our checking range. And then when we do choose to bet, we're going to actually be a lot more polar. So the times we're on like a board like 6-5-4 and we like flop a set, for example, like we're going to want to choose a larger sizing, because we expect our opponent to have a lot of hands that they'll continue with, flush draws, straight draws, etc. So we can charge more for them. Yes, Chen.
I think you want to bet large on wet flops because you want to make your opponent's range feel indifferent. So if you bet small, they're going to be able to continue with like bottom pair and gut shots very easily. And when you bet big, they're not going to know what to do exactly. So you want to make your opponent feel indifferent.
Exactly, yes. So then your bluffs benefit a lot from this. When you've got like ace queen backdoor flush draw on like 6-5-4 or something like that, you benefit a lot from getting a lot of their like one pair hands, because they're going to be calling, especially if it's like something like button versus big blind, they're going to have a lot of these like offsuit one pair kind of hands, maybe one pair plus like gutter, and you benefit a lot by just getting those hands to fold.
It sort of like goes both ways, because I mean, if you have nothing on the board, you just have like 2 overs and a backdoor flush draw or something, you're betting big and you're probably folding out ace, king, or like whatever they have the range advantage with. But if you're really smashing the board, you're also confusing them. So I mean, they're never letting go of aces, kings, or whatever they raise with in position, and you're out of position. So I mean, you're betting for protection. You're not really betting for protection if you flop sets, but you're betting just to confuse them. I mean, like he said, so I mean, you're sort of confusing them with their range, but if you're like super weak too, oftentimes that can work if you're betting like only 20% of your range versus checking down 80% and like check folding or maybe check calling with like some equity to show down as the board sort of improves. So I mean, just keep them guessing if you're betting only 20% of the times.
Yeah, I would say the only language I would change there is like is kind of what Chen mentions, is we want to drive them to indifference. Like the main goal of GTO play is that we want to make our opponents kind of indifferent and like unsure what to do. I think you're describing it as like confusing them, which is like they have this like one pair, like, and now I have to face like a pot size bet on the flop. Like, what do I do here? Like, and then when they call and we have a set, we just print so much more money against them. So like, yeah, so and then we can make a ton of money with our good hands, and then if we get them to fold those one pair hands when we have our bluffs, which we should have, because we're going to be quite polar. Whenever we're going for a big size, or we're betting with a polar range, so we've got our best bluffs, and then we've got like our really good hands. Yeah.
I think you want to go with a small sizing when you can clear out a lot of equity with like a small sizing. So like a board like King 10-6, I'd want to go larger sizing because 8-9, 7-8, Queen Jack, you want to make feel indifferent. But a board like Queen 3-5, 7-9 is automatically going to fold, or Jack 10 is automatically going to fold. You don't have to use a big sizing on those boards.
Yeah, exactly. So you're getting ahead a little bit because we're going to cover exactly the flop types. But no, that's really good. Which kind of brings me to now the second question, which is now when the strategy for our range is so when the strategy for our range is mostly betting. So we have a board that we're going to be betting more. We have a range advantage. How do you think that influences the size that we choose?
You can sometimes, I mean, the converse is true as well. I mean, you can sometimes choose like a super small size just to either keep them in or bait them into raising you. When you have close to the nuts, or I mean, they're drawing like super small.
Yeah.
So you can mix it up both ways. You can take the orthodox approach, but you can also like bet like 5% pot or 10% pot. Maybe 3 big blinds into a pot which is already like 20 big blinds, just to confuse them. If you're strong or like super weak and you're just trying to, out of position, just bet and get the showdown. So
the only thing I would say is not just sometimes, but all the time. When you're betting most of the time, you're just basically always betting small, and like the solver will mix sizing, and we're supposed to be talking on the flop. The solver sometimes will mix and have a small size, a medium size, like 40% pot, and then a big size. But honestly, I think what works better is it's simplifying your strategy, is like kind of choosing one size on flops. So like knowing this is a flop that I'm just going to go small, and my small is always 25 to 30% pot. So I think if you're choosing 5 to 10% pot, that's too small. Like I would think you shouldn't really go smaller than 25% pot, 20-25. And then you should have like a medium size that's like around 40% pot, and then like a larger sizing which is like 80% or like pot, maybe even sometimes 125%. And then you should know what flops you want to bet on those sizings when you do bet. You should know your frequency, and then you should know that size. And this is what my coach does, as opposed to trying to memorize and get the right frequencies of a small size and a medium size on flops. It just simplifies your strategy a bit. But that's the only thing I would say is like I would say if you know you're supposed to be betting often, just always go for the small size. Don't try to mix in like some percentage that you want to go for a big size and complicate your strategy. So yeah, bet small, somewhere between, I said 25 to 35% pot, and this will be kind of dry flops that like Chen mentioned, things like queen, 3, deuce, that they're just gonna have so many auto folds, right? They're all these random like offsuit middling cards that just kind of auto fold, have absolutely no equity. So let's now take this into like actual flops and have you guys think about, one, how often should we be betting on these flops, and then conversely, of course, like what sizing should we use? So the first flop type we'll talk about is kind of like a dry high card flop. So ace, 7, deuce, rainbow. How do you guys think we should be betting often or inoften, or maybe like 50-50? What do you guys think on this kind of flop?
I think it's 100% small size bet.
Okay, you think 100% small size? Why?
Because that board smashes your range, right? Once you've raised pre-flop, ace high boards, that's all you.
Yes.
So you bet small and you bet 100%.
Yes, also sorry, we're button versus big blind here, is the assumption in this scenario. So we
Okay.
raise single raise pot button and big blind called. But yes, we're gonna have a range advantage here, we're gonna have nut advantage here. We just have all the ace X in our range that our opponent has much less. So basically, yeah, we're betting literally 100% of our range. We're betting with every single hand in our range, and we're always using a small size. Okay, what do you guys think about the next one? Like a wet, low card connected, 6-5-4, two suits of the same suits.
Probably check a lot in position, just to bottom through.
Okay, check a lot, and then if we do bet, what sizing do you think we should be using?
Probably won't bet at all, but if I have aces on the button and like the big blind draws me out of position, 6-5-4, 2 diamond board, just betting like aces and kings, everything else just checking.
Okay, so I want to pull, like, instead of you thinking about very specific hands, I want you to think about like what your range will want to do, right? So and then think about like when you do bet, like what size do you want to use with your range when you know you're going to be checking very often on this board?
35%.
35. Okay, so you think 35% pot, so like a middling sizing.
Yeah.
Okay.
They can hang themselves with like 7-6 suited on a 4-5-6 connected board. They never folding, but I mean, you know, if you do get raised, I mean, then you gotta think about if they have like combo diamonds or two pairs or flop sets versus your potential overbear. So
Okay.
35. If I'm really betting, 35%.
You think 35%, Jen?
I'd be betting big, I think, because if you have aces and they have 7-6 suited, they're not going to fold to small sizing. You make small sizing very easy to play against. If you overbet, like I wouldn't overbet necessarily, but like if you overbet and they have 7-6 suited, they're going to start feeling pretty uncomfortable by the turn.
Yeah.
And then also if you're opening button, you have a much wider range actually. So you have every suited combo of 7-8 suited. You have every set combo. You have some very strong draws as well.
Mm-hmm.
So I would probably bet big but lower frequency.
Yeah, so that's on this specific board, mostly check. So I'd say it's probably like something like an 80% check.
Yeah.
And then when we do bet, we just go for like a large sizing. And like, notice here I'm not using like very specific percentages. You'll notice that because I just want to give you guys like the general heuristic and not get too caught up in like I need to do this 72% of the time or whatever it is. But yeah, the main thing here is that our opponent has the range advantage and nut advantage here. Like yes, we will have like 7-8 suited, but they're gonna have, and we'll have some of like the sets and stuff like that. But they're gonna have all the offsuit combinations of 7-8. So they're gonna have all the which is 4 times more combinations. They're also gonna have like 3 deuce, maybe not all the combinations 3 deuce off, but they'll have 3 deuce suited. They're gonna have like all the 2 pairs which we're going to be folding some of these offsuit 2 pairs, like 6-4 off, we're not going to put out the button. So they're just going to have a lot more stronger hands on this board, and we just have kind of like a lot of overcards a lot of time. So we're just going to be checking a ton, and then when we do choose to bet, we want to choose the bigger sizing. Because a hand like when they have a hand like 7-6, open-ended straight draw plus pair, they're kind of like price insensitive, meaning that they have to still call at least one street. So let's charge them the most, because there's going to be a lot of bad cards for us on the turn and river where we can't really get more value. Like if a 3 or a 7 comes, there's 4 to a straight. Like we're not really betting aces for value anymore at this point. Like it's just super gross, and we kind of just want to check down and like pot control at that point. So there's a lot of turns that just kill our action. So we want to get as much money as we can on the flop. I would say you probably be 125, like betting 125% pot. You will see that for sure on this kind of board when you have a hand like aces. But you'll even see aces check back on this as well for a lot of reasons, because it just knows it's not going to really be able to realize a ton of equity on this board. Yeah. What do we think about this next one? Queen, queen 5. So like a high card paired board.
Definitely bet small with the entire range.
Okay. Bet small entire range. How come?
Entire range, like 30%.
Okay.
Position on the board.
So you think we have like a big range advantage on this, and it heavily favors us as the button?
I'm probably betting it up with my entire range, like 30%.
Yeah.
30% pot or 35% pot.
Cool. No, I'm saying so it's the right answer. I'm just trying to derive at like why it is, because if you understand why, like you probably intuitively.
I'm only getting calls from like either 5x or like a queen. I mean, a queen's not gonna raise, a 5x might float, but then if you bet with like your entire range, you're gonna get fours more often than not, even from ace 5 if the board doesn't degrade a lot to the river. And then versus if they have a queen an odd time wherein like there's 2 queens out there, so there's not a lot of combos. I mean, sometimes you're gonna have a queen too, or maybe aces or kings. You can actually bluff catch. If you get action on the flop and on the turn, if you bet, you can actually check back some rivers with even your pairs, middling pairs. But if you don't, you can just bet, and they're gonna fold.
Yeah. So I want to focus on the flop, and I want to focus on our decision making on the flop only. And the main decision here on the flop is, do we like what I want you guys always to be thinking about is like who has the range advantage?
It's gotta be the
And
button.
we have the range advantage on this board, which maybe you don't think about explicitly when you're playing, but intuitively you just know I have a lot more of the better hands. I'm going to have a lot more of the queen X. They're going to have, kind of to Chen's point earlier, like there's going to have a lot of auto folds on this board. Like what do you do when you have 6-7 off, or like, I don't know, like 7-9 off or something like that, 7-10 off on this board? Like you're just going to have auto fold. So when you think about the opponent, they have a lot of hands in their range that are just going to auto fold. You just get to bet a ton, and when you're betting a ton, we're always using a small sizing. So we bet 100% on this kind of flop and always using a small sizing. Okay, what do you guys think about the next one? Now like a low card paired board. So instead of queen, queen 5, we've got 5-5-6.
Either check my entire range or bet like small again.
Okay. What else
Would
you
it
think?
mostly check, because like the big blind range would hit that flop more?
Okay. Why do you think the big blind range? So you think the big blind has like the range advantage here?
Because they're low cards.
Okay. Yeah, because they have low cards for sure. So the biggest thing here when you see low paired boards is your opponent's just going to have a ton of like what really drives like range advantage is going to be the offsuit combinations of things, and your opponent is going to have a lot more offsuit 5x than we are.
Yeah.
Like we're not opening Jack 5 off on the button, or like Queen 5 off, right? But they're gonna call with a lot of, I mean, not necessarily Jack 5, Queen 5, but they're gonna have like 8-5 off, 7-5 off, 4-5 off, and then they will have and then Ace 5 off. So they're gonna have a lot of these like offsuit combinations. They're gonna have a lot more 5x basically in their range, so they have the trips advantage. And then also they're going to have a lot of hands that they can raise us with on this kind of board as well, like straight draws, gutters, etc. So yeah, that's going to drive us to want to check a lot more often. Yeah.
So I know the big blind definitely has the net advantage, but does the button actually have a range advantage?
On this specific board, that's a good question. Let me see
similar.
Yeah, so I think it's similar, but let's see. I'm trying to remember
Yeah.
exactly. So opponent has the nut advantage, but this is one where we do have the sight range advantage. You're right.
Mhm.
So yes, we do have the sight range advantage, but given that they have the nut advantage, we want to be still checking here quite often. So this is one of those like rare scenarios where the range advantage and the nut advantage is separated between the big blind and the button. But generally speaking, we want to mostly check, given that they have the nut advantage, and when we do bet, again, we want to choose a big sizing. So somewhere between like 70 to 100% pot, or like 65 to 100% pot. Cool. Do folks understand that, the difference here? Because the range advantage, because we're just, I mean, both players are gonna miss the board a decent amount, but when we miss the board, we have a lot more just like overcards that are still have more equity compared to their misses. But they're going to have a lot more 5x, which is kind of like the nuts on this board. So they're going to have a lot more of the strongest hands, even though our overall range advantage is stronger. Okay, cool. So that was this one. Mostly check large size. Okay, last one on this board, monotone flops. What do you guys think?
Bet big.
Small.
You think bet big?
I'll
Some okay. You say bet big. Why?
I'm generally gonna have like some info against my opponent, so it's like I'm gonna charge any of their ace x hearts sort of like draws. So I wanna charge them big with my sort of ace king, and even if they have like just a lone king and I actually have the nut blocker, I'm still gonna bet big. So I don't want to make it cheap for them. If they keep calling with like king x 3 times, good. If I don't get there, but if I have either the nut blocker or ace king, and they either have an ace of hearts, x of something, or some else flush draw, maybe a queen jack, with like a queen of hearts or something, I just want to charge them the max 3 sweeps.
Okay. Okay. And then I know some people said, I heard some people say small. Who said small? Okay, why do you guys think small?
It's kind of clear out a lot of equity with small bets because it's just hard to flop a flush.
Mm-hmm.
You know, if they don't have a heart, it's hard to continue.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yes. So I would say this is a flop where we do want to be mostly betting and for a small size. And the main reason here is that like, very similar to what Chen said, which is just like a lot of people when they don't have a heart in their hand, they just kind of, it's one of those like auto folds. Maybe if they have like some like they don't even necessarily feel great about their like one pair. If another heart rolls off, they don't feel great about like their gutters, because if they drill their gutter but it's a fourth heart, then they have like reverse implied odds in that case. So this is a flop that we generally want to be betting frequently and using a small size. But I would say specifically monotone boards is, so this monotone boards and low card pair boards, when I was first started playing tournaments, is probably two of the boards that I made the most mistakes on the flop. Because this is not a 100%, like notice the difference here where like, these are like betting 100% of range. Monotone flops, it actually fluctuates a lot more. Some you might even see as low as like 60% bet. And that's largely driven by the fact that the big blind player is going to have generally a lot more suited hands in their range. Because they're going to basically call with every single suited combination. Even like 10 deuce suited, jack deuce suited, queen deuce suited. They're going to defend with all of those. And generally when we're opening, we don't have all these like junky suited hands. So this is also a spot where they have more of the nut advantage. Generally speaking, they're going to have a lot more potential flushes than we are. We still have the overall sort of range advantage. So these are situations where we usually go for a smaller sizing, but it's more of a small medium sizing, like a 40% pot bet, depending on the exact kind of like monotone flop. Yes.
Is that the same even if it's like not a king high board? What if it's like a low kind of flop on a monotone?
If it's a low monotone, it's just going to drive our betting frequency even lower, right? So this is like yes, we're going to have a lot more king X, so it's going to drive a higher betting frequency. So I'd say like the range on monotone is maybe somewhere between like 60 to like 85%. So you're going to be in a higher range of wanting to bet when it's like a king X sort of like disconnected board, whereas like low monotone boards, you're going to be betting less. But good question.
So just another question. So I mean, let's say you consider the same board or even like a lower monotone board. I mean, and I have queen 10 on a king 9-3 of hearts, I mean, I don't want to put a straight flush out there, so I have like queen x of hearts, and I know I have this info that they have ace of hearts, x of something.
But how would we have that info?
So I'm assuming that I'm targeting like ace x from like previous sessions with the player. I know that I'm targeting that, but knowing that info, what should be my bet sizing if I have flopped the flushed in position on this board or either even a small. Like should I charge them the max or should I just let them hand themselves by just keep betting small and they're gonna keep calling?
So I think the one thought I want to get out of your head is thinking about your opponent's very specific hands and your own very specific hands and trying to think about what you would do when I have exactly queen 10 of hearts. Like we should always be thinking about what we want to do with our range of hands and how our opponent should be responding with the range of hands for them. Because it's going to be very, very infrequent to almost impossible to, by the flop in this situation, put your opponent on an ace high flush draw. Like we don't have enough information to narrow them down, and they're going to continue with way more than just an ace high flush draw. They're going to call with like they're going to call with a pair. They're going to call with their straight draw sometimes. They're going to raise with some of those hands sometimes. So that's the one thing that I want all of you guys to be thinking about, is really think about what your range wants to do. So always start first with what does my range want to do, and then think about what does my specific hand want to do. Always start there first, as opposed to the other way around. Otherwise, you could be giving tells away because you're not really thinking about what your range generally wants to do, but you're like, oh, I've got the nuts here, so I want to bet big. But this is a board that I'm not supposed to ever have any big bets on. And then instantly, like, when I see that, like I see this all the time playing in low stakes tournaments, it's like, you know, somebody's like betting big, or they're donking on a flop that they're never supposed to donk on, or they're betting big on a flop that they're never supposed to bet on. And instantly in my mind, I'm like already thinking, one, this person's not really studied, so there's going to be a potential like exploit to them. And then two, the next thing is figure out, okay, what is the exploit? Are they just betting big every time when they've got the nuts? Are they betting big every time when they've got like they got a draw? And usually if you just pay attention a little bit, you're going to find out what those things are, and you're going to get heavily, heavily exploited. Which is why if you guys which is why I really caution you guys against thinking about like what your specific hand is, especially on flops when you're deciding what to do, and only think about first what your range wants to do, and then decide. So I would say and then when you're playing in one of these spots where it's like, okay, I know I'm supposed to bet 100% of range and small sizing, it doesn't matter what my hand is. Like I could have pocket aces on A7 deuce. I'm always betting small 100% of the time. I'm not now betting bigger because I have aces and I want to charge him when he has a set of sevens. Like if I have aces and he has sevens, we're probably gonna get the money in anyways. But like if I start betting big, then people are gonna be like, okay, what is this guy doing? What did I interpret that this is supposed to be a flop where he's supposed to always bet small, but now he's shooting the bet big? And there's probably some leak there because we're not balancing properly ourselves if we start to deviate that way. Yeah, cool. Okay. So let's go into now kind of general weaknesses that I see with the population. So this is where, from playing a bunch of live tournaments, that I see the population make a ton of mistakes. So first, as the in-position player. So we're just talking single raise pots. Single raise pots, in-position player raises, and then big blind calls, which is like, and when we talk about like studying both pre-flop and flop in tournaments in general, like these are kind of like the highest frequency spots that you'll want to practice and drill, like button versus big blind. Like that's why I focus on button versus big blind so often, is because like that's probably like the most common formation you're going to be in tournaments. The button is raising super wide, big blind is defending super wide. So practice that. Practice under the gun versus big blind. Practice like late position versus late position, like cutoff versus button. But yeah, so anyway, so like in position, the in position player is c-betting too often. So I think there was a very long meta in the game of poker where like people were folding way too much on the flops, and where people were just generally adapted by just c-betting all the time. Like almost like all flops you're c-betting somewhere between 80 to 100% of the time for a small sizing, and that just overperformed. Like the small c-bet just overperformed for like decades in poker. And now what we're finding is kind of a shift now where people are generally more studied, they're defending wider, they're check raising more often, and because of that, people who are c-betting too often are just getting owned. in my poker. And I was making this mistake a ton. It's like I was c-betting way too much. I was c-betting like 100% frequency on all paired boards. So like I have range advantage. And it's like I was just getting owned in all these like low 5-5-7 boards, like 6-6-8. Like I was just getting check raised all the time, and just getting like giving away way too many chips. So I'd say that is like people are c-betting too often. So knowing when you're supposed to be c-betting, when you're supposed to be checking back a lot, what our range wants to do. Like I showed you guys like a couple boards today. So what I'd really love to see in the tournament is like you see one of those boards and you're like, I know I'm supposed to be checking very often. Like even when you've got like, you know, like a pretty strong hand or like, or whatever it is, or like just know that what your range wants to do and then think about what your hand wants to do. The second piece is not manipulating bet sizing enough. So not thinking more intentionally about bet sizing, using large sizings. It's even something I'm still trying to incorporate in my game is like, what are the flops that I want to be using large sizings and like actually executing on that? Because it's very easy to just default to just using a small sizing. And like, I would still say, generally speaking, if you know you are going to be betting often and you just like getting the difference between like a 25 or 30% bet and like a medium sizing, like a 40%, is not a huge loss of EV if you don't get that right. If you're missing some of your big bet spots, that is a bigger loss of EV. So I would pay attention more to that. And you could just start with knowing what flops do you want to bet smallish, less than 50%, and then what flops do you get to bet big with, and try to incorporate some of those into your game if you aren't already using big bets and splitting your flop ranges that way. Actually, by a quick show of hands, like how many of you guys are like very intentionally already using the big bet size on the flops? Like, yeah, like right now, like you see a flop and you're like, I think I should be betting big here and actually betting big on those. Okay, so like 3-4 or so people. So yeah, it's tough. It's hard. It's hard to know. It's still something I'm studying a ton, and I definitely don't like get it right. And there's so many different kinds of flops. Like I'll show you the spreadsheet that my coach uses, and you'll understand like how complex this stuff is and how hard it is to really understand, like to actually like know and like memorize. So I try not to like really memorize stuff. I just try to understand the general heuristics. Out of position, similarly, like c-betting too often. So again, it's like, let's say we raise in the cutoff and we get called by button. I'm going to show you guys like an actual like chart of this, but basically people are c-betting too often, especially when they're out of position. Responding to the big size very poorly. So to Chen's point, it's like, what do you guys do on like, what was the board example that we had? Like, let's say just like 6-5-4, and then you have 6-8 or something, but then they bet like 125% pot, right? Like, how do you respond to that? Like, am I supposed to have check raises? Am I supposed to be calling? Am I supposed to now fold my top pair and my gut shot? So, and it largely just comes from not kind of like understanding your opponent's range enough to know what are the kind of bluffs that they're choosing to bluff with, and what are the value hands that they're choosing to bet with. So responding to big size poorly, and then also just like auto checking and not really thinking about leading. We're not really going to go into donk betting or leading at all today, but it is a very important part of the game tree that I've had a lot of success with leading, and I think because a lot of other players, especially low stakes tournament players, are very unstudied and they don't really understand like leading, so it confuses the heck out of people. And then when they're confused, it leads them to making some like really dramatic like blunders and mistakes. Yeah. So, but we'll probably cover that in a separate session. And I actually did do a whole session before, like a few months ago, on leading. So we'll cover a couple actual now scenarios and formations. I'm curious what you guys think in terms of like bet sizing and frequencies. So first here is cutoff versus button. So this is now, we're moving away from button versus big blind. We raise in the cutoff, the button calls, it's a single raise pot where 50 big blinds effective, and the flop is 6-5-4 diamond clubs. So first, in terms of like the flop type, like what do we think in terms of like range advantage? Like who do we think has a range advantage here between cutoff and button?
I feel like we both don't have a range advantage on this board. Because like button's flatting range should be like sometimes stronger than opening range.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes, depends, right? Like you're opening ace-9 off, but they're not flatting ace-9 off, kind of thing. But I'm actually not sure.
Yeah, in this,
The bottom's closing range is gonna be like a lot of like middle hands on that like equilibrium. It's not gonna be like top 5 quadrant hands. So I mean, it could be those, just flatting with like a lot of middling hands, and then same time cutoff can also open like 6-6, all the 6-5 suited, all the 8-7 suited. So it's hard when it's like a 50 big blind effective stack and you're opening and it's a 6-5-4 coordinated board to diamond board.
Yeah. Yeah, so I think the equities run pretty close and the ranges run pretty close here. And I think what people generally underestimate in this formation is how strong the button range will generally be, especially the button flatting range. And this would especially so be the case if it were like a more dramatic scenario would be if we open under the gun and button call. That range is very strong. We actually looked at this exact scenario last week for the folks who were here last week. Like for them to start 3-betting us out of the button, they have to do it like with a very polarized range, and they're even calling as good as pocket jacks, and in some formations even calling pocket queens.
ICM definitely want to call queens a lot.
Yes, especially so with ICM. But even in Chip EV, there's some spots where they're still calling the queens at some frequency, not very often. But point is that like both of our ranges are, I mean, we're pretty wide. We're opening something like 40% of hands, 38% of hands is cut off. And they're maybe calling with something like, I don't know, under 30% of hands. So I would say they probably generally, the button probably generally will have the range advantage here. They're also going to be calling with like a lot of these like they're going to be largely driven to a lot of these suited kind of hands as well. Whereas we are going to be opening with, we're going to have more of like the offsuit kind of junkier hands, yeah, like ace-9 off, which they're not really going to have. Ace-10 off, which they might choose to either like 3-bet or even fold at some frequency. So given that, how often do you guys think we should be continuation betting as a cutoff player here
20%.
on this board? 20%?
Somewhere around there maybe.
Okay, 20%, and
Maybe less.
yeah, the large sizing.
Yeah.
If we do bet, okay. Anyone think anything else besides 20%?
Yeah, maybe even lower.
Yeah,
Maybe
could be
lower. Okay, but so we think not very often. We think we should be betting infrequently.
Terrified to bet.
Terrified to bet.
Aces wants to check sometimes.
Let's take a look. So we're checking, yeah, we're betting like 15% of the time. And this is actually a really interesting spot where like, we're betting 15% of the time, but when we do bet, we actually choose a small sizing here. And I think this is a function of like, this is not a great flop for the opponent either. They're actually just also going to have like a lot of folds, so we don't necessarily need to, as opposed to when we're playing against a big blind range that's going to actually smash this flop a ton. We're playing against another hand where it's like the top 30% of hands, or like a kind of a pretty tight range relatively. So this is actually an interesting spot where we don't have to go too big when we do bet. But the biggest thing is that we're not betting very often here, 85% of the time. And I'll tell you, like especially late position versus late position, like my general deviation is I check 100% of the time on every single board. So with that, let's look at a different scenario. Same cutoff versus button, but now it's ace, king, queen, rainbow. So who do we think has the range advantage here, and how often do you think we should be betting?
Cutoff has range advantage, for sure.
Okay, yeah.
Probably like 60 to 30 with cutoff to bottom, sort of like range advantage. It's probably like whoever.
It's probably not that dramatic because they're still gonna have a bunch of like
And
decent
then
hands.
flat a lot of like
Check.
king, queen.
Yeah, but
suited,
they don't
jack,
have
suited.
aces, they don't have ace king, they don't have
They don't have
kings.
none of the good stuff.
They may
don't
not
have
have ace
queens.
queen either.
Yeah, they may not have ace queen
They might have
off, I
king,
think
queen
flat
suited, jack,
sometimes,
suited,
but
king, X, all those. Yeah, the cutoff
Yeah.
probably is gonna have like 60 now.
so we have the range advantage, we have the nut advantage. Yeah, so then how often do you guys think we should be betting then, given those things?
Often,
Quite often?
Yeah.
Okay, and for what sizing?
small.
Small sizing, okay. Does anyone else think we should be betting in often or any other answer?
Mostly bet like 1/3 spot.
Mostly bet 1/3, okay, so mostly bet small sizing. Ben, what do you think?
I mean, I'm kind of tempted to bet bigger here.
Yeah, I
Okay.
was gonna say, it seems like a board that you bet big on.
Yeah, because they're gonna have a lot of king jack suited, queen 10 suited, queen jack suited, jack 9 suited, hands that are also gonna be indifferent versus
Mhm.
big sizing. And they're gonna have to call one with like king jack suited, king 10 suited, and then either blow them off their equity or
Yeah,
get a lot of value.
okay. So let's take a look.
So I'm not 100%, I guess.
So I think you guys will be really surprised with this one. We're checking 80% of the time with this one.
Wow.
We're checking 80% of the time. So, and when we bet, we're still going for the small sizing. But the biggest thing here is like, I think honestly it's fine if you go slightly larger, like B25, like I might go like B40.
Yeah.
On B40 just means 40% of the pot. But the main thing is like late position versus late position, we're playing extremely passively, which is like, this is a flop that like we have the clear nut advantage, the range advantage, the solver still likes to check because our opponent's still also gonna, again, have, like they have quite a tight calling range. Like we're raising with 40, whatever percent of hands, they have like something like 30% less, or 30% or less of hands in their range. And even though we have like a lot of the super strong hands that they don't have, like they're still gonna have a lot of like offsuit Broadway kind of stuff, like king queen off, like queen jack off, jack 10 off, like a bunch of these hands. They still have a lot of strong hands on this board, and this just goes to show we kind of showed like a really bad flop for us and a really good flop for us, and in both scenarios we're checking a lot, and which is why like my personal strategy is I just literally check 100% of the time, cutoff versus button. And this is a flop that I would bet most low stakes tournament players are all, some people are probably just range betting this. They're betting 100% of the time in small sizing, and that is a big leak and weakness. Where you're just, if you're doing that, you're just gonna get like destroyed against good players. Yeah.
Is that, in this formation, is that because the button's range is so condensed that it's like for the most part, across most flop types, cutoffs checking more often than we think? Is that fair to say, or is that too much of a generalization?
It does come down to, yes, their range is quite narrow, especially compared to ours. Like, especially when we're raising from late position, our range is pretty wide,
Yeah.
right? Like, we don't have to have an ace, king, or queen in our hand, right? Like, and even if we do, like, it's still like, I don't know, queen is like bottom pair here. So like, we have, like, our range is kind of wide compared to them. They're going to be calling with a lot more of these broadways. So like the percentage of their range that actually hits this flop, that makes it to the flop, is still going to be quite strong and have a lot of things that they can continue with and can apply pressure with.
I see that the bluffs are mostly jack X, 10X with a backdoor flush draw. Kind of interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah, block the straights. Yeah.
Yeah, blocking the straights.
And I assume the half of it is just if you have a backdoor flush draw, you bet.
That's almost certainly it. So yeah, you can see like it's interesting to always look at like what are the hands that they choose to bet for value. So like, I mean, yeah, like your ace kings.
But those
like
hands kind of
top
block like hands that auto fold too. It's kind of weird because like 7s, 8s, and 6s probably auto fold, but they're blocking those.
Oh, you're wondering like why do they choose like these ones here?
Yeah.
I think it's a function of like
Not opening the other stuff too, I guess. That's the worst you have in that spot.
exactly. So like usually when the solver is choosing bluffs, it's usually gonna choose the lowest or the weakest one in whatever that hand class is. So like if the main concept we want here is that we want to be bluffing with our straight draws, so like our jack X, then this is like jack 6 and jack 5. Like you see the highest frequency jack X bluff is with jack 5 suited, which is the absolute bottom of our jack X range basically. So it's going to do that at the highest frequency. It's going to choose our worst. Whereas like our worst offsuit ace is like ace 5 off. So you'll see that that's going to be starting to, or sorry, that's not a bluff because we have an ace here. I'm trying to think.
Like pockets 2s, 3s, 4s, I guess, because
Yeah.
you unblock 7s, 8s, 9s.
Yeah, you just steal so much equity when you get all of these hands to fold, right? Like you bet with 2s and like a lot of these hands are just going to fold, and you just like steal so much equity from that.
I think with jack and 10 blocking of that outweighs the blocking of the 7, 8.
Yeah, that's true too. Yeah, because like they're always continuing jack 10.
Okay, I think we're out of time, but let me just see if there's one more one. Okay, maybe we'll just do one more. I'm curious what you guys think on this one. So button versus big blind. So we raise in the button, big blind calls, single raise pot, flop is 9-3 deuce rainbow. How often do you think we bet, and what sizing do you think we choose?
I would big blind.
You would
I
big
would
blind?
big blind.
We against the big blind. We're the button. We are the button.
We are the bottom.
Yeah, we're the button.
Big. I think big, but I'm not sure about frequency. Probably like half the time you bet.
Half the time? Okay. How come? Do you think we have the range advantage here?
I just, there's not, they don't have that many 3s and 2s like
Mm-hmm.
in the range. I think we do.
I think you have range advantage, and they're not defending 9 deuce off, 9-3 off.
Yeah, the biggest things on boards like this, like 9 low or like disconnected, like is one. Think about how many 2-pair combinations our opponent has. Like to Chen's point, they're not defending 9 deuce off, 9-3 off, and sometimes not even like 3 deuce off. So they don't have as many 2-pair combinations. When they do have a 9x, they're going to be almost always calling a bet on the flop. So then what we get to get a ton of value from is when we have a hand like ace 9, king 9, and then we just like bet big here, and they have to call with like 10-9. They're going to have 10-9, 9-8, 9-7, 9-6, all these other hands like 9-5 sometimes, and we just get a ton of money from them. So this is a spot that we're going to see large bets at a decent amount when we do bet, but we also have the range advantage and the equity advantage here, net advantage. I think this exact one that I pumped out, it does have us betting often. It chooses a bigger sizing, but I think because it's one of those spots that would mix, it's going to have some small sizing and then it's going to have some big sizings, and I was forcing it to choose one. So when I forced it to choose one, it kind of just settles in the middle at this 40%, this like 40% pot bet. But I would just say like these are like just great if you like have ace 9 on 9-3 deuce, like experiment with the big bet, and like you're just gonna like make a ton of money off of like when they have a 9 here, and you're just not gonna get check raised very often. Okay.
Why are the low aces checking more than the high ones?
Which ones? Like these ones?
Like ace 7 and ace 6.
Or you mean these
I'm just
ones?
saying generally, it seems like there's a couple aces on the left.
On the left side?
Betting
I mean,
on-
these are all still mostly betting.
Yeah. but
They're
there's,
all
like,
still
greens
mostly
on-
betting, but like
Yeah.
ace 5, ace 3, well, I guess specifically ace 5, ace 4, just because they have the, like, my guess here is that it's got the gutter, it's got more equity than some of these other ace-X, so it's just hitting it a bit more if you do get check raised.
Yeah.
So it's going to be fine with checking a bit more often for that reason. That's my guess there.
Wonder why the suited ones are checking so frequent, and this 7x, 8x, and 6x, king x too.
Yeah, you see this a lot in the solver. It's gonna like choose to play like a little. Well, it depends on the board. Either play more passively or choosing these as like your bluffs. But I think it's gonna mix in like some of your checks, and these are like your decent equity checks.
Maybe you're also blocking like pocket pairs that are going to continue. I don't know, like 6s, 7s, 8s.
Maybe I don't think that's as big of a factor, to be honest.
Is it
Versus,
block
like-
out higher aces maybe? Is that why? It's
That's
big?
possible. Too.
What?
Or some of the aces wanting to bet the bluff out,
I don't think high aces are going to fold to.
like the low aces. ace
No,
five.
Yeah,
yeah,
ace-
like you're not gonna, when you bet these, you don't really get folds from those. Like my guess is that these just have kind of like enough equity to kind of bet for value. I mean, obviously ace 9 does.
Because like some
but,
king
like,
highs should continue on that.
exactly, they're gonna float with like some Broadway. So I think these honestly just have enough equity to bet for value. These ones are a bit more vulnerable, so you want to kind of like bet these ones. Like you're gonna have your straight draws, and like, I think the reason why you choose the suited ones as well is because they're more comfortable calls against a check raise, because you might have like backdoor flush draw, whereas like those ones, no backdoor flush draw, you just have like a gutter, you're gonna be folding more to check raise, which is why you want to check with them more often. Yeah, but the solver definitely does weird things sometimes. Anyways, we'll wrap up there so we can get the tournament started. Good luck today. Hope to see you really good Yeah.
Was that the big blind, like, betting on the flop?
That's button betting.
That's the button betting?
Yeah, that's button.
Sorry, can you just explain the law?